it's a fantastic system.
It's so beautiful. You've got me so proud.
And it's gorgeous.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm so sorry.
You go ahead. You go ahead.
So thank you everybody for eating and waiting and chatting, but without further ado, the next First Lady of Virginia, Suzanne Youngkin.
I am so sorry I am late. Getting out of that Northern Virginia is just a trick a minute. And we had a deluge of rain, and that got us a little behind too. I am just thrilled to be in Allegheny County and here in Clifton Forge. I have a sort of funny story. When Glenn and I were newly married and we moved to Arlington, our wedding anniversary is on Memorial Day weekend. And so for our very first wedding anniversary, I wanted to take Glenn somewhere where we could go on a horseback trail ride. I love horses, I love riding, I love being in nature. So I looked up all the different places we could go, and one of the places that had a stable was the homestead, right nearby. And so then I made the mistake of going and trying to book a room and seeing how much it cost to go to the homestead and go on a horseback ride. And we could not afford that, so we went to a small cabin near Hot Springs. I wish I could remember the name. It was like River Ridge Lodges or something. There were these 5 adorable lodges. And that's where we spent our very first wedding anniversary. So as we were coming in, I was thinking about how much fun we had had. And boy, have things changed in our lives and in our marriage. But anyway, quickly, I know you've been waiting. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I just want to make sure for those of you who are here and you don't know a lot about Glenn and why he's doing this and what inspired him to do this, I want to give you just a little bit of context for what he is trying to do here in the Commonwealth. As background, like I said, Glenn and I were married 27 years ago. I'm a native Texan, and Glenn got a scholarship. He's a native Virginian. He got a scholarship to college in Houston, Texas, a school called Rice University. And after I graduated from college, I moved to Houston for my first job. And we were in a bar in Houston. Yes, you can meet your spouse in a bar. And Boyd, who went to high school with me in Texas, played football at Rice University. And I was talking to my friend Mark, and Glenn came up with his friend and started talking to me, and we were introduced. And roughly 10 months later, we got engaged. Again, I wouldn't recommend that either. But it tended to work out. So when Glenn was getting out of business school, we were newlyweds, and we were deciding whether to come to Virginia to be near his family, or whether we might relocate back to Texas to be near my family. And we had the grand idea to go to Northern Virginia and get really good job experience so that we could use that as a springboard to go someplace else, because no one stays in the greater Washington, D.C. area, right? You go in your 20s, you work hard, you save a little money, and you get out of there. And 27 years later, we are still living in Northern Virginia. And it is where we raised our 4 children. We have 3 boys and a girl, aged 24, 21, 20, and 17. And it's where we have built our lives together, and God knew exactly what he was doing, and I wouldn't change a minute of it. When we first moved to Northern Virginia, Glenn worked 1 year for a management consulting firm called McKinsey & Company, and very shortly thereafter, he had the opportunity to go work for what was then called a leverage buyout firm. Now it's called private equity. It's a company called the Carlyle Group. When Glenn joined Carlyle, that industry and that company was in its infancy. I think he was roughly the 32nd, 33rd employee. By the time Glenn retired in the summer of 2020, the Carlyle Group had over 2,000 employees all over the world, and he had been given the distinct privilege of being the co-CEO. Just to put in perspective what Carlisle grew into, and again, it was a rich, rich blessing to Glenn. He learned a great deal, and he had his fingers in a lot of pie there, but by the time he left last summer, Carlisle had assets under management that are 4 times that of the Virginia state budget. So it's a really, really large company, and Glenn cut his teeth building jobs, balancing spreadsheets, understanding the influence of economic realities. And I, for one, can brag about him. I was so proud of what he did at Carlisle, and I'm so excited to see him apply that very unique skill set to problem solving in Richmond if he's fortunate enough to serve as the 74th governor of this amazing Commonwealth. So in summer of 2020, Glenn was doing what you were all probably doing, fretting about the health of his family, worried about the viability of this large international company that he was co-managing. And COVID was not a good thing for Glenn Youngkin. He is an extreme extrovert. I mean, he lives and breathes interaction with people, and so he got behind that computer and got on Zooms and got on conference calls and was pretty miserable, actually. There were 7 of us living at the home. Our 4 children all came home, and then our daughter brought a girlfriend who stayed with us during COVID, so there were 7 of us moving around, trying to Zoom, trying to do our work and be positive. And one Friday afternoon, Glenn texted me. He said, where are you? I said, I'm out in the yard. He said, let's go for a walk. And I was like, Glenn Youngkin doesn't go for walks. I'm like, this is very curious, but of course we had to go for a walk because we had no privacy whatsoever in our own home. So we did go for a walk that Friday afternoon, and Glenn said, I need to tell you what I'm going to do this weekend, and I need to ask for your prayers and your partnership in this. And he said, I'm going to retire. And I said, well, I think you're having a midlife crisis. I said, we need to have a little conversation. This could be a very long walk. And by the end, he had convinced me that this is what he should be doing. He said that he felt like he had given Carlisle every ounce of his spirit, that he was very proud of what he and his partners had accomplished, that he thought it was in a very good place to withstand the pressures of COVID, that it was time to turn over the reins, and that he really wanted to seriously consider serving the public. He wasn't sure what that would look like, but that's what he felt like God was calling him to do. And so, like I have done in everything in our partnership, I prayed with him, and I gave him a big hug, and then I went off and found a corner to cry. So anyway, that's how his departure from Carlisle transpired, and he stepped into a litany of conversations and considerations last autumn, and on January 27th of 2021, Glenn launched his campaign to become the next governor. We did not know what we were doing. We still sort of don't. I'll be honest about that, but we are tremendously energized, and Glenn is so excited to try to bring some common sense and thinking back into the decisions that are being made in Richmond. He's talking about a million things out there. I hope each and every person in this room has an opportunity to meet him and hear what he's talking about. I'm going to tell you about 3 that he thinks are extremely important. First one is jobs. I don't need to tell anyone in this room that the unemployment numbers that we see, both as a byproduct of COVID, and also, if I'm honest, what's been a very discouraging posture towards small businesses in particular in Richmond is doing to Virginia. There's a conflicting narrative out there. Virginia gets propped up as kind of a darling for business, and we love that. Don't get me wrong. We're absolutely thrilled when Virginia is given stars of approval by any organization. But when you start to really peel back that onion and look at what's happening, unemployment numbers are at an all-time high right now. Virginia is ranked 49th in the United States for starting a small business. There's a lot of problem getting capital in this state. There's a lot of problem with regulations and small business taxes. We are very, very hopeful that with the current overlay of the Delta variant, which is certainly a scary and ominous proposition, that our leaders will both consider lives and livelihoods. Glenn does not believe that we can shut our economy down again. It could be devastating, and I need not tell the women in this room what the current economic environment has done to women in the workforce. In the United States alone, 3 million women have dropped out of the workforce. And here in Virginia, we've seen exponential numbers of women move out of the workforce as they've been forced to stay home with their children who are not in school, or from economic environments that were shut down. So you can see Glenn and his team talking a lot about jobs, job creation, job formation, sustainable jobs. We want people in jobs for the next century. We don't want to replicate jobs that were really, really strong 20 years ago. We're looking at all sorts of innovative ways to jumpstart the economy in Virginia, and we love your partnership in that. Another thing Glenn's talking about is safety. When our opponent was in office, crime increased 43%. Very sad to me, rapes increased in the Commonwealth all 4 years that he was in office. We are experiencing right now a 20-year high in the murder rate. This is just not acceptable for Virginians. You know, safe communities and a strong economy and education, which I'll speak to in a minute. These are kitchen table issues. These are not Republican issues. These are Republican issues. These are Democrat issues. These are independent issues. These are Virginia's issues. And one of the things that Glenn has been extremely focused on is representing all Virginians and making opportunity for all Virginians. And let me speak into safety again. Glenn is a businessman. When Glenn wants something to be improved, he invests in it. He does not defund it. So we are huge supporters of law enforcement and first responders. We are very dedicated to giving them the tools and the funding that they deserve and that they need to keep us all safe and protect our communities. And Glenn will defend qualified immunity. For you all who are unfamiliar with qualified immunity, essentially what that says is that law enforcement officers are protected from frivolous lawsuits. This does not mean that bad behavior gets a pass. What this means is that our law enforcement officers have to be able to step into the spaces that they need to go and know that we have their backs and that we understand that they are taking a very, very high risk, in some cases their lives, on our behalf. And we will defend qualified immunity and defend those who protect us. Last thing I want to talk about is education. Again, this is a Virginia issue. We are not comfortable with what is happening in education right now. This is at the elementary school level, where we feel like politics is trying to be pushed into our schools. And this goes all the way up to our universities, which are becoming increasingly expensive and increasingly difficult to get access to. And Glenn wants to make sure that Virginia continues its reputation of excellence in education. I, for one, I'm from the Lone Star State. They have great schools there. I go home and I have a lot to be prideful of being a Texan, but I tell you what, this state, this Commonwealth, has some of the best schools in the country. I wear that as a badge of honor when I go everywhere, and I know everyone in this room feels the same way. We cannot lower standards. One of the things our opponent did was lower the educational standards in K through 12 schools under a banner of equity. We just disagree. We feel like competition is good. We feel like challenging our students is good. We feel like saying we're going to have the highest standards, not because we don't want people to achieve those standards, but if we set the bar high, that's where we're going to go. So we're going to talk a lot about excellence in schools. We're going to talk a lot about funding repairs of our schools that are falling apart, and there are some in this Commonwealth. You know, a child should not, their education should not be defined by the zip code in which they live. That's not the way Virginians roll. And that's not what Glenn is going to stand for. And last but not least, I just want to implore people to vote. Again, yes, would I love for you to support the most diverse Republican ticket that has been put forward in many, many years? Absolutely. And, you know, we are so grateful to Delegate Austin and to all those, honestly, in public service. I have a whole new appreciation for public servants. And I don't care what party you're aligned to. You are doing a greater good. And I personally am so deeply, deeply humbled by people that will step out and sacrifice their time in public service. But I can tell you, the Republican Party is eager to serve. Winsome Sears, Jason Miyares, and their spouses have become friends. They are honorable. They are incredible. One is an immigrant to this country. One is the son of a Cuban immigrant who fled Fidel Castro. They are so tremendously excited to go to work for you. And my husband feels the very, very same way. And just to remind you a little bit about voting. Voting starts on September 17th. This is not an election about November 2nd. We want everyone to vote early. Please, please, please check with your registrar and see where you can go vote. If you are not registered to vote, October I'm going to get this a little wrong, maybe 10th. Well, 22nd is the last day to request an absentee ballot. October 12th. If you are not registered to vote by October 12th, you cannot participate in this election. Please spread that word to your neighbors, your co-workers, your community, your workplaces. Get everyone excited to vote. As an off-year election year, Virginians always stumble a little bit to get energized to go to the polls, right? Because we're not voting for president, but we are voting for big, big things. This election is being watched by the whole of the United States. People are curious. They're saying, what's happening in Virginia? Wait a minute. The Republicans have a female Jamaican immigrant as their lieutenant governor candidate? They've got a Cuban American as their attorney general? They've got female delegate candidates all over the Commonwealth from all stripes. I just went to the launch for Maria Martin in Prince William County. She's from Bolivia. She's amazing. So I think there's something very, very special happening. And people are watching. And they want to know what Virginia stands for. And they want to see Virginia lead, because that's what Virginia has done in the context of the history of our nation. And I, for one, and I know I can speak for Glenn, we are so, so humbled to be in this position. And we are so, so ready to go to work for each and every one of you. And I'd like to thank you so much for being here. I'd like to thank you for being patient with me, for being late. I would like to encourage every single woman in this room to get signed up for Women for Glen. These ladies over here have signed up. We are doing informational Zooms on safety, on education, on jobs throughout the fall. You'll be invited to those. You'll be invited to special women's events. Women are the secret sauce, girls. We're going to elect the next governor of Virginia, and I certainly hope that that'll be Suzanne Youngkin. Thank you so much. Do you want me to take any questions? What do you want me to do? Okay.
Charles is going to manage.
And again, to the Gardens, thank you so much for hosting us today. I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah, can we do maybe 3 or 4 questions?
Absolutely we can. And let me also say, this building is so phenomenal. I'm on the board of the Shakespeare Theater Company in Washington, D.C., and I've also been deeply involved in art education, philanthropy at Wolf Trap. For those of you who have not been to Wolf Trap or the Performing Arts in Northern Virginia, it's part of our national park system. It is a gem. And I was reading a little bit about the theater here, and I noticed that with the launch, with the renovation, there's a decided interest in education, and that's tremendously exciting to me. So kudos to you all for supporting what is going to be really a beacon to your community.
Do we have a question over here?
Questions?
Yeah,
Everybody knows that. You got a question for Mrs. Youngkin?
I do not.
You were just.
I was so thorough. Wow! Oh, we have one, yes.
I mean, there seems to be so many reasons for people not to go back to work. If you look around this town, you'll see businesses with help wanted signs everywhere. What is your husband going to do to incentivize people to get back into the workforce?
Well, there are certainly a lot of hypotheses as to why that's the case, right? So I think Glenn and his team, just like everyone in the United States, is curious as to why there is this drought of employees. We know a couple of things, right? We know that people have been propped up by government funds during this time, which, let's face it, a lot of people needed a leg up. A lot of organizations needed that help. And so we're tremendously, I for one am tremendously thankful that people got the help they needed. But right now, sadly, they're incentivized not to get back to work because they're able to support, again, not in a grandiose fashion, but able to support their families on government subsistence. So I don't think Glenn's in favor of that. I think Glenn would have stopped those payments. But seeing as those are about to run out, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. One of the things that I think we need to do a much better job of, and Glenn is very dedicated to, is reskilling people for the workforce. So Glenn and I started a not-for-profit during COVID called Virginia Ready. Virginia Ready scholarships persons into community colleges to get certificates, which can take anywhere from 6 weeks to 12 weeks to get a certificate in high-demand jobs. So things at hospitals, technology, innovation. We have got to do a better job of training our workforce. Not everyone needs a 4-year college degree. That is something, unfortunately, that has been pushed down the throats of our young people. It's causing a lot of anxiety and, frankly, a lot of school debt. So we are very, very big proponents of vocational education, our community college systems, and retooling people to get back to the workplace. We also have to get our kids back in school. Families cannot go back to work when they have children in the house. I mean, this is not rocket science, right? So we are very, very hopeful that despite, safety measures and et cetera, that our schools will go back 5 days a week and give families and parents the support that they need to get back to work. I think we also need to do a better job of supporting small business. Small business is the backbone of our communities, and recruiting people into healthy businesses is a challenge right now. And Glenn does not think the answer is all related to wages. A lot of it is work environment. A lot of it is incentivization to be back in a job that has flexible hours and flexible arrangements. And businesses can only do that if they thrive. Glenn wants to peel back regulations on small business. He's talked about using some of the money that's coming from Washington to give small businesses a one-year tax holiday. He's also talked about putting dollars back into the pockets of taxpayers with that money, something that the Democrats completely left out of their recent plan on how to invest the funds that are coming from Washington. And so I think Glenn is just very, very determined to make sure that there are good opportunities that incentivize people back into the workplace, and working with businesses to make sure that they are thriving and able to have the kind of environment that workers really deserve and are drawn to.
How does the campaign believe it can overcome the heavily Democratic bloc in Northern Virginia?
I think what the campaign is most focused on is speaking into issues that are universally important to Virginians. We could talk all day about the issues that divide people, right? You got your camp here, you got your camp here. And for the last years, there's been a lot of conversation about those issues. That is not what Glenn and Winsome and Jason are talking about. The things that I mentioned right now: workforce readiness and jobs, safety in our communities, quality education, excellence in our schools, keeping politics out of our schools. These are issues that are relevant not only to Republicans, but to all Virginians. That's what we're doing. We're talking a lot about that. We're speaking directly to women. As I mentioned, I and a large team launched Women for Glenn in the first week of Glenn's campaign. Women have unique viewpoints. They have unique voices. We're doing a lot of listening. We're doing a lot of talking. 54% of the electorate that voted last November was women. And they care about schools. They care about their communities. They want to go back to work. They want their children to go to school and stay in Virginia and work in Virginia. We're not doing a good job of keeping young people in this state. So we feel like we're speaking into issues that are universal and bring people together, as opposed to causing divides.
Thank you guys, everybody, for coming and waiting.
So grateful to you all. Have a beautiful afternoon.